The stranger outside the glass. The night had barely settled over Los Angeles when a man in a tattered gray coat stood quietly by the wide glass windows of a high-end restaurant tucked between tall, glistening buildings. The air was crisp with the scent of roasted garlic and seared steak that escaped from the revolving doors each time a guest walked in or out. Inside, wealthy diners clinked glasses and laughed without a care. Outside, the man simply watched. His name was Jeremiah. His hands were rough from years of labor, but now they trembled slightly from hunger. A backpack, faded and patched, rested against his feet. Inside it were all his belongings: a pair of wool socks, a crumpled photo of his daughter, and a journal. He wrote in every night, even if only with broken pencils on napkins. He had not eaten properly in 2 days. 2 valet drivers whispered behind the podium, giving him suspicious looks. Inside, a young hostess in black heels and a sharp uniform noticed Jeremiah and frowned. She whispered something to the restaurant manager, who stood tall and proud with a gold name tag and a sense of authority that was both visible and sharp-edged. He nodded and walked toward the door. The door opened with a gentle swoosh. The manager stepped outside, his expression tight with practiced politeness. "Sir," he said firmly, "you can't stand here. This is a private establishment." Jeremiah nodded softly. "I wasn't going to come in, just needed a moment to rest." "I'm sorry," the manager replied, a hint of impatience rising in his tone. "We have rules." Jeremiah lowered his head. "Of course. I understand." The manager turned, ready to go back in, but something caught both their attention. A motorcycle's low growl echoed through the quiet street as it came to a stop near the curb. The rider dismounted slowly, pulling off his helmet with calm grace. His long black coat fluttered slightly in the breeze, and when he stepped forward, the valet did a double take. It was Keanu Reeves. Keanu didn't speak at first. He removed his gloves and glanced around. His eyes were soft but alert, like they always had been. He noticed the restaurant. Then his eyes shifted to Jeremiah. He paused. Something in Jeremiah's posture, the gentle way he clutched the old backpack, made Keanu take a step forward. The manager saw him and instantly straightened his tie. "Mr. Reeves," the manager greeted with an eager smile. "Welcome. We're honored to have you tonight." Keanu barely looked at him. He walked up to Jeremiah and asked in a quiet voice, "Are you all right, sir?" Jeremiah looked up, startled. "I'm fine, just passing through." "You look tired," Keanu said gently. "And cold," Jeremiah tried to smile. "Been worse," the manager interrupted quickly. "He was just leaving. I told him this place isn't—" Keanu raised a hand, calm but commanding. "I heard." The manager froze. Keanu turned back to Jeremiah. "What's your name?" "Jeremiah." "Well, Jeremiah," Keanu said, "would you like to come inside with me?" Jeremiah blinked, confused. "Inside?" "Yeah, this is my place," Keanu said with a soft smile. "And I think tonight you should be my guest." The manager's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The hostess inside peeked out, her eyes wide. Other guests near the windows began to murmur. Jeremiah hesitated. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not," Keanu said firmly. "You're reminding people of something important." Jeremiah nodded slowly. For the first time in a long while, someone had seen him, not just looked at him, but truly seen him. Together, they walked toward the doors. As they entered, the conversations inside dropped to a low hum. Heads turned. The glow of chandeliers shined softly over the 2 men, one dressed in polished black, the other in worn-out gray. Yet somehow, they looked like equals. Keanu guided him to a private booth in the corner, one that overlooked the city through a wall of glass. The hostess approached nervously, menus in hand. Keanu didn't take one. "Bring us whatever your heart tells you to," he said kindly. "Feed him well?" She nodded, then quickly turned to the kitchen. Jeremiah sat across from him, unsure. "Why are you doing this?" Keanu leaned back. "Because I've been there." Jeremiah looked puzzled. "Not the same way," Keanu added, "but I've known pain. I've known what it's like to be invisible." Jeremiah lowered his eyes. "Most people don't want to see. That's their loss," Keanu replied. Not yours. Silence fell between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was full of something else. Respect. A waiter arrived with fresh bread and soup. Jeremiah stared at the food, then slowly reached out. His hands shook, but he took a spoonful and closed his eyes. This is good, he whispered. Keanu smiled. You deserve good things. People say that, Jeremiah said. But they don't mean it. I do, Keanu said without hesitation. And tonight, this is your table. Outside, the city moved on. People drove by unaware of the moment unfolding inside. But inside that booth, two souls found a quiet connection. One shaped by pain, the other by the strength to not look away. And just when it seemed the evening had found its peace, a man at the next table stood and sneered. Is this what this place is now? He said loudly. Feeding vagrants? Keanu turned his head slowly, his eyes colder now. Sir? Keanu said, his voice calm but sharper. You're welcome to leave. The man scoffed. You can't talk to me like that. I just did. The man stepped closer. You're ruining your own place. Keanu stood up slowly, towering in quiet strength. No, I'm reclaiming it. The man looked ready to argue, but then something changed in Keanu's gaze. A firmness that didn't need shouting. The man stepped back, muttered, and left. Jeremiah looked up at Keanu with silent awe. Keanu sat back down, his voice softer again. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Jeremiah whispered, Thank you. Keanu nodded. This is just the beginning. But none of them knew how far this one moment would reach, or the storm that would soon rise outside these quiet walls. The ripples of kindness the following morning arrived quietly, the streets still wet from a late-night drizzle. Rays of sun stretched slowly across the sidewalks, warming the concrete and softening the cold that had held the city in its grip. Yet in one corner of downtown Los Angeles, inside a cozy booth near the glass wall of a five-star restaurant, something was still lingering in the air, something far more powerful than morning light. The whispers of what had happened the night before had already begun to ripple. Jeremiah sat alone at the booth now, the space where Keanu had sat still holding his warmth like a memory refusing to fade. He looked around, not with fear, but with wonder, like a man who had just discovered that the world still had corners of grace. He had been given a fresh set of clothes that morning, simple but clean, and a warm shower thanks to Keanu's quiet instruction to the staff. There had been no press, no grand announcement, no cameras, only kindness, pure, unexpected, and real. The head chef, a stern man with a heavy French accent and thick arms dusted in flour, came to the table and placed a steaming plate in front of Jeremiah. Mr. Reeves said breakfast is on us, he muttered, then added, in a quieter tone, Eat well. Jeremiah blinked. Thank you, chef. You don't need to thank me, the chef replied without looking up. Thank him, and maybe thank yourself for surviving. As the chef returned to his kitchen, Jeremiah's hand hovered over the food. His fingers trembled slightly, not just from hunger, but from disbelief. People had walked past him for years without seeing anything but dirt and shame. Now someone saw more. Outside, a car pulled up. A young woman stepped out, stylish and hurried, with a phone pressed to her ear. She walked briskly toward the restaurant, her heels tapping against the pavement. She didn't notice Jeremiah at first, but as she passed the glass, her steps faltered. She looked in. Her face changed. Inside, Jeremiah noticed her too. Her hand reached out and pushed the door open gently. She stood by the entrance, hesitant. Dad? She said softly. Jeremiah looked up, stunned. He stood slowly, his breath caught in his chest. Maria. She nodded, tears already filling her eyes. They hadn't seen each other in almost 5 years. He had disappeared after losing his job, after falling into a spiral of loss and addiction. He had always promised himself he would find her again when he was worthy. But that moment never seemed to come. How? He whispered. How did you find me? I didn't. she said, stepping closer. Someone tagged a photo of you online last night. It went viral. Someone said you were having dinner with Keanu Reeves. I thought it was a joke. But then I saw your eyes. I knew it was you. Jeremiah felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. The room blurred. Maria embraced him gently, not caring who watched. I've missed you so much. He held her carefully, afraid that the moment would vanish. I'm sorry, he whispered. I was ashamed. You're here, she said. You're alive. That's all that matters. At the far end of the restaurant, the manager watched silently, conflicted. The night before, he had seen Jeremiah as a nuisance. Now he saw a man whose daughter wept with joy just to find him. A man who had sat quietly, gratefully, and changed. The energy of the entire place. News traveled fast in Los Angeles, especially stories that included celebrities. Within hours, media trucks had begun circling the block. Journalists tried to sneak photos through the windows. Influencers speculated about the mysterious homeless man who shared a meal with Keanu Reeves. Many thought it was a publicity stunt. Some thought it was a movie shoot. Keanu, of course, had disappeared early that morning. But he hadn't left without plans. Down in a quiet parking garage beneath the restaurant, he met with an old friend, a woman named June, who ran a nonprofit organization that helped people like Jeremiah get back on their feet. Keanu had worked with her quietly for years, funding programs, organizing shelters, but always from the shadows. I need your help, he told her. His name is Jeremiah. I want to make sure he has more than one good night. June smiled, her eyes tired but warm. You're still doing this, huh? People helped me once, Keanu said. Now it's my turn. You really think you can fix all this? No, he replied. But I can fix it for one person. Maybe more. Maybe they'll help someone else. And maybe that's how it starts. Meanwhile, Jeremiah and Maria sat together at the booth talking through lost years, hard truths, and fragile hope. Maria had become a nurse, driven by the memory of her father's compassion. Even in his darkest days, she remembered him sharing food with strangers, helping lost pets, smiling at kids. You were always good, she said. You just forgot for a while. He lowered his eyes. I thought the world forgot me. Not everyone, she replied. Jeremiah told her about the cold nights on the street, about the shame that weighed more than any hunger. He spoke of the moments when he considered ending it all and the small miracles that had kept him going. A warm blanket left behind, a stranger's coin, a child's smile. But none of it compared to last night. Just as Maria reached for his hand, the restaurant doors opened again. A man walked in briskly, holding a laptop under his arm and wearing a forced smile. He introduced himself as a producer from a major talk show. We'd like to have you on, he said to Jeremiah. You and Mr. Reeves. Tell your story. Inspire the world. Jeremiah froze. Maria's expression hardened. We're not looking for a circus, she said. The producer chuckled. It's not a circus, it's exposure. People love redemption arcs. You'll be famous. We'll even pay. Jeremiah stood slowly. I don't want to be famous, he said. I just want to feel human again. Come on, the producer said, stepping forward. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Do you know how rare it is to go viral with Keanu Reeves? Jeremiah looked down at the food on his plate, then back at Maria. This moment is already rare, and it's real. Real doesn't last, the producer snapped. Then maybe that's the problem, Maria said. He left, frustrated. But outside the restaurant, a different kind of audience had gathered. People weren't holding phones. They were holding warm blankets, care packages, and homemade cards. Someone had started a small online movement called Remember Jeremiah. Strangers began donating to shelters, volunteering time, and sharing their own stories of feeling unseen. Something was growing, something real. That evening, Keanu returned. He didn't use the front door. He entered through the back, quietly, and walked to the same booth. When he saw Maria, his face lit up, He remembered her from years ago, when Jeremiah would bring her to the edge of movie sets just to catch a glimpse of him. "You've grown," he said. "You remember me?" she asked. "Your dad spoke about you once," Keanu said. "Back then, he worked on the set. I never forgot his words." Jeremiah smiled faintly. "You told me once that being kind wasn't about being noticed." Keanu nodded. "It's about being there when it counts." And then Keanu pulled out a simple folder. Inside was an offer, a small apartment, counseling, and a part-time job at the restaurant. "Only if you want it," Keanu said. "No pressure." Jeremiah held the folder like it was made of glass. "I don't know if I deserve all this." "You do," Maria whispered. And just as they were about to celebrate that quiet moment, a man in a dark suit stepped into the restaurant, holding legal documents. "I need to speak to the owner," he said sharply. Keanu stood up slowly. "That's me." The man handed over the envelope. "You're being sued. Someone claims this restaurant discriminates against paying guests and tarnished their reputation by hosting the homeless." Jeremiah's eyes widened. Maria's face darkened. Keanu didn't flinch. He took the envelope, opened it calmly, and read the words. The world outside had started watching, but not everyone was cheering. And now, what began as one act of kindness was about to be tested in a courtroom filled with shadows. A table they couldn't overturn. The afternoon sun bathed the city in golden heat, yet inside the restaurant, a cold shadow had settled. The air no longer buzzed with casual laughter or the familiar rhythm of dishes clinking. Instead, silence reigned, broken only by the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the soft tapping of a single finger, Keanu Reeves's finger, on the edge of the envelope he had just opened. It was strange how something as thin and silent as paper could carry the weight of arrogance, injustice, and the sharp sting of old-world cruelty. Keanu read every line of the legal notice with careful attention. Not once did he look flustered. Not once did he ask someone else to handle it. He simply read, nodded, and then folded the paper as if it were nothing more than a napkin with a wine stain. But deep inside him, something began to burn, quietly and steadily. Across the booth, Jeremiah sat still, the color slowly draining from his face. "I didn't mean for any of this," he said softly, his hands gripping the sides of the table. Keanu looked up. "This isn't your fault. I shouldn't have come in." "You didn't come in," Keanu interrupted. "You were invited." Maria, standing nearby with arms crossed and chin lifted, stepped in. "This is exactly what the world needs to see. How fragile their respectability is. One act of kindness, and they crumble." Keanu smiled faintly at her fire. "They're not crumbling. They're pushing back." "Then push harder," she said. Keanu stood up slowly, the envelope still in his hand. "No, we don't push. We stand." The restaurant staff watched from the corners, from behind counters and swinging doors. People who had once seen the homeless as a nuisance now stood quietly, wondering how far the ripples from that one evening would spread. The lawsuit had been filed by the man who had stormed out the night before, a self-proclaimed investor and longtime diner, who claimed the restaurant had lowered its standards and insulted its paying clientele by hosting vagrants in the dining area. But it wasn't just a lawsuit. The man was also a lawyer. The threat was real. Keanu's lawyer, Elise Ramirez, a sharp, compassionate woman who had represented underdog causes for years, arrived later that evening. She met Keanu in the back office where vintage movie posters and framed photos of film crews filled the walls. "They're going after your brand," she said after reading the document. "They know the restaurant has your name, your spirit, your story, and they want to twist it into something ugly." "Can they win?" he asked. "Technically," she said. "No. Morally? It depends on what people believe. They'll spin a story. They'll say you're turning your business into a shelter. They'll pull support. It'll cost you." Keanu leaned back, his fingers steepled in front of him. "Money isn't the cost I'm worried about." "Then what are you worried about?" "That people will stop believing kindness is worth the trouble." Elise paused. Then she said, "So what do you want to do?" He smiled. I want to give them a story they can't twist. And that's exactly what he began to do. The next morning, before the restaurant opened, Keanu called the entire staff together. Waiters, chefs, hosts, dishwashers, everyone. They gathered in the main dining room where the table from the night, with Jeremiah still sat untouched. "You've all seen what happened," he began, "and now you see what comes after. But I didn't start this place to be just another high-end dining spot. I started it because I wanted to create a space that fed more than hunger, a place that fed dignity." The staff listened, some with skeptical eyes, some with inspired hearts. "You don't have to agree with me," Keanu continued. "But if you stay, you stand with me. Not just for Jeremiah, for anyone who's ever been treated like they don't belong." A young server, no older than 22, raised her hand. "Will we lose our jobs?" "Not if I can help it," Keanu said, "and not if we do this together." Slowly, hands began to rise. Not all, but many. Meanwhile, outside the restaurant, things were changing. More and more people were showing up, not with cameras, but with food, clothing, and time. Strangers who had been silent for years began writing about their own stories of rejection and rediscovery. A woman wrote about her brother who had disappeared into the streets after a mental health crisis. A man wrote about the first meal a stranger gave him when he was too ashamed to ask. Someone had written in chalk on the sidewalk, "There's more than one way to serve a meal." By the end of the week, Jeremiah had moved into a small studio apartment. It wasn't much, but it was safe. Maria visited daily, and sometimes they would sit in silence just watching the rain against the window. He was learning how to live again, how to make his bed, how to breathe without guilt, how to write again. And Keanu. He was writing too. In a dimly lit room behind the restaurant, he began drafting a speech, a public one, the kind he never liked giving. But this time, it wasn't for a movie or a ceremony. It was for a courtroom. He was going to defend not just his restaurant, but the very idea of what hospitality should mean. The court date was set. When the day arrived, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Headlines screamed about a celebrity, restaurant owner choosing bums over business. The lawyer who had filed the suit, a man named Clinton Voss, arrived in a three-piece suit and a smile as sharp as his cufflinks. Inside the courtroom, the judge raised her brow when she saw the room filled to capacity. Elise leaned over to Keanu. "Are you sure about this?" He nodded. "I need to say it out loud." When the time came, Keanu took the stand. He didn't sit behind a team of advisors. He stood alone. "I didn't grow up with everything," he began. "And even after success found me, I never forgot what it felt like to be alone, to be unseen, to be treated like a ghost in your own city." The room was still. "A few nights ago, I saw a man being turned away, not because he did anything wrong, but because he looked like someone who didn't belong. And I realized that we keep making rules around our comfort, but comfort shouldn't come at the cost of someone else's dignity." Clinton Voss interrupted. "Mr. Reeves, are you saying that anyone should be allowed to dine for free simply because they've had a hard life?" "I'm saying," Keanu said calmly, "that every human being should have at least one night where they're treated like they matter." Voss scoffed. "And how will you afford that? Will you feed the entire city?" "Maybe," Keanu replied. "Or maybe someone else will see what happened and do the same. And maybe that's how we build something better." The judge listened carefully. Elise stood next. She presented stories, letters, and support from former guests who praised the restaurant's new heart. She read messages from the online campaign that had grown into something far beyond one act of kindness. She showed that what was being called a violation of brand standards was, in fact, the very soul of it. The trial would take more than a day. But outside the courthouse, something bigger was already decided. Hundreds of people gathered, not to shout or scream, but to serve. Tables were set up, free meals were offered, music played from a single speaker as people of all backgrounds shared stories and hope. Someone had painted a sign that hung from the trees. "Kindness isn't policy. It's purpose." And just when Keanu stepped outside for a moment of quiet, he saw something that stopped him completely. Jeremiah stood in the crowd, not as a homeless man, not as a guest, but wearing a clean shirt, holding a tray of food, and offering it to a teenage boy with tired eyes. "You came," Keanu said. Jeremiah turned, his eyes warm. "You gave me one night. Now I'm giving one back." Keanu smiled, but deep inside something heavier stirred. Because far from the celebration in the shadows of a dark office, Clinton Voss sat at a desk full of old papers. Papers about Keanu's past investments, land deals, and buried clauses. In the restaurant's founding documents, he had found something, and he intended to use it. What began as a fight for kindness was about to become a battle for everything Keanu built. The clause in the dark, the courthouse steps were nearly empty, now the echo of arguments and applause replaced by the steady hum of city life resuming its rhythm. But far from the cameras, far from the hearts that had been moved and changed, something colder stirred in the corridors of strategy and vengeance. Clinton Voss sat alone at a dark oak table, his fingers tapping a precise rhythm across the surface. The office around him was minimalist, sterile, and full of silence, just the way he liked it. In front of him lay an aged, leather-bound binder, its corners worn from time, its contents forgotten by nearly everyone except those who knew where to look, and Voss knew. He had gone back farther than anyone expected, back to the original founding documents of the restaurant. Buried deep in the language of those early contracts was a clause few had read, and even fewer had remembered. A clause written by the first investors before Keanu had full creative control. It stated that the restaurant's operational integrity was to reflect an image of exclusivity, elegance, and prestige. Any deviation, especially acts that could be perceived as disruptive to the high-end clientele experience, could be considered a breach of contract, and more importantly, grounds for forced dissolution of ownership. Voss smiled. This wasn't just about a lawsuit anymore. This was a chance to rip the soul out of something meaningful, all because it made people uncomfortable. His eyes scanned the papers again, already imagining the headlines. Keanu Reeves loses restaurant after housing homeless man. He would paint it as recklessness disguised as compassion, and people who felt threatened by change, they'd eat it up. Meanwhile, Keanu sat in a quiet cafe miles from the courthouse, not as a celebrity, but simply as a man who needed space to think. Across from him sat Elise, her glasses slightly tilted on her nose, her laptop open to an article titled, "The Kindness War. Is Hollywood's hero going too far? They're twisting everything," she said, scrolling through hateful comments and sensationalized headlines. "Some say you've turned your restaurant into a charity. Others say you're using this for a comeback." "I don't need a comeback," Keanu replied, his voice low. "I never left." Elise looked at him. "You sure you're ready for what comes next? Because Voss is about to play dirty." "Let him," Keanu said. "He's trying to burn a bridge. I'm building one." Back at the restaurant, Jeremiah had officially started working. Not as a mascot or a symbol, but as a kitchen assistant. He scrubbed pans with quiet diligence, taking pride in every speck he removed. Maria visited daily, sometimes just to sit by the window and watch him through the glass. Seeing him back on his feet didn't erase the past, but it gave it meaning. The staff had grown closer too. Those who once saw Jeremiah as the homeless guy Keanu brought in now called him by name. They heard his quiet humor. They saw his discipline. And more than anything, they witnessed his transformation. One evening, just after closing, Jeremiah walked outside to take the trash to the back. The alley behind the restaurant was quiet, dimly lit by a flickering bulb. As he turned the corner, he saw someone waiting, a man in a crisp gray suit. "Jeremiah, right?" the man asked. Jeremiah froze. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," the man said. "But you will." He stepped forward, holding out a business card. "My name's Clinton Voss. I'm here to make you an offer." Jeremiah didn't take the card. "I don't want anything from you." "Hear me out," Voss said smoothly. "What if I told you there's a way to change everything for the better, for everyone like you?" Jeremiah narrowed his eyes. "Look," Voss continued, "you're A great story, people love a comeback, but let's be honest, this whole thing, it's unsustainable. Keanu's playing with fire. Sooner or later the money dries up, the investors pull out, the staff leaves. Jeremiah turned to go. What if I told you, Voss said louder, that you could run your own program? We fund you, set up a new place, somewhere you're in charge. All you have to do is distance yourself. Jeremiah stopped. From Keanu? From this whole stunt, Voss said. Just walk away. Tell your story without him. You'll still be a hero, just a richer one. Jeremiah stared at the card. It felt like poison in paper form. He looked at Voss square in the eye. You know what the difference is between you and him? Enlighten me. He gave me a chance, when there was nothing in it for him. You're offering me something because you think I'm a tool. Voss's jaw tightened. Think about it. People like you don't get second chances often. Jeremiah walked back inside without a word. Later that night, he told Keanu everything. Keanu listened quietly, then nodded. You did the right thing. He's not going to stop, Jeremiah warned. Neither will we, Keanu replied. But deep down, Keanu knew they were entering a new phase. This wasn't just about public perception anymore. This was about control of the restaurant, of the narrative, and of the future. The following week, Keanu stood before the original board of investors, men and women who had once supported his dream, but had slowly stepped away as his mission grew more human and less profitable. Now they had gathered again, summoned by Voss, who claimed Keanu had broken the original brand agreement. The room was sharp with suits and scented with expensive cologne. At the head of the table, a gray-haired man named Winston Crane looked over the documents Voss had prepared. We created this restaurant, Winston said slowly, to be a luxury experience. You knew that. And it still is, Keanu replied. But luxury doesn't have to mean exclusion. But that's not what you signed, Voss interrupted. You signed a brand promise. Now you're using the restaurant as a shelter. Keanu stood calmly. No, I used it to remind people that kindness belongs everywhere. Even if it costs you everything? Winston asked. Keanu nodded. Yes. The room fell silent. Finally, Winston leaned back. Then we'll vote. But before the vote could be cast, a knock came at the door. A staff member poked their head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone who wants to speak. A line of people walked in one by one. Former guests, single mothers, veterans, artists, all people who had been fed, helped, or simply welcomed into the restaurant when they had nowhere else to go. And at the very back of the line stood Jeremiah. Each one took a turn. Each one told their story. The board listened, some visibly shaken, and just when it seemed no more could be said, Maria stepped forward and placed an envelope on the table. This, she said, is the money we raised through the Remember Jeremiah campaign. If you're so worried about profit, we'll cover every cent you think you lost. Keanu looked at her, stunned, but Maria wasn't done. And if you vote him out, she said, looking the board dead in the eye, you'll answer to all of us, because this restaurant isn't just a place anymore, it's a movement. Outside the boardroom window, the sun was setting, casting a golden hue across the city skyline. But inside, the light in that room came from something stronger than daylight. It came from truth. And that truth was about to decide whether a table set with kindness could survive a world built on control. The fire they didn't expect. For nearly 2 hours, the boardroom had remained frozen, air thick with tension, faces unreadable, and the only sound coming from the ticking clock mounted high above the long glass window. The golden light of late afternoon was slowly fading into shadows, and yet the weight of what had been said still hung over the room like a storm cloud refusing to move. At the head of the table, Winston Crane, the original lead investor, stared down at the envelope Maria had placed in front of him. Her words echoed louder than any lawyer's argument, louder than any clause Voss had read aloud with his smug, sharpened tongue. The girl had not spoken with authority granted by money or law, but with something more dangerous to men like him, Conviction. Around the table, the other board members shifted in their chairs. They were old money, polished people. But not all of them were heartless. Some had sons who struggled with addiction. Some had sisters who vanished during mental health crises. Some had walked through pain in silence, wearing suits not to boast, but to hide. "Well?" Voss said sharply, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You've heard enough. We vote now." Winston looked at him, then looked at Keanu, and then at Jeremiah. The old man sighed and spoke, not like a businessman but like someone remembering a long-forgotten promise. "I remember when we first met, Keanu. You came into this room, not asking us for fame or favors, but for a chance to build something that fed people, not just their stomachs but their souls." He tapped the envelope gently. "I forgot that." Keanu didn't speak. Winston turned to the others. "We'll vote, yes, but not on removing Keanu. We'll vote on amending the original clause." Voss blinked. "What?" "That clause," Winston said, "was written when we thought prestige meant velvet chairs and overpriced desserts. Maybe we were wrong." Voss stepped forward. "This is absurd." "You're dismissed, Mr. Voss," Winston said calmly. "You're not part of this board. You're a hired dagger, and I no longer need you to draw blood." Voss turned, furious, but no one looked at him. No one even acknowledged his presence. In the end, that was the deepest wound, irrelevance. He stormed out, leaving only the faint scent of his cologne and the echo of shoes clicking against marble. The vote passed. Unanimously, Keanu remained the owner, and the clause that once protected. Exclusion was rewritten with 3 new words: compassion is policy. That night, back at the restaurant, Keanu returned not to applause or champagne but to the soft clatter of dishes being cleaned, the hum of music playing low, and the smell of stew simmering in the kitchen. It was quieter than usual, more humble, but it was home. He walked through the dining room where a handful of customers sat, some rich, some working class, one with a baby sleeping in her arms. No cameras, no pretense. Just people eating, talking, breathing together in the same space. Jeremiah came out of the kitchen with a tray of lemon water and spotted him. "You're back." Keanu smiled. "You still here?" "Thought about leaving," Jeremiah joked, "but I think the dishwasher would miss me." They both chuckled. Keanu sat down at the same booth as before. Jeremiah joined him, sliding into the seat with the casual comfort of a man who no longer felt like a ghost. "How did it go?" he asked. "We won," Keanu said. "You mean, I still have a job?" "You still have a future," Keanu replied. But just as peace began to settle in, something outside caught their attention. A loud bang, followed by another, then screaming. Maria, who had just entered through the back, came running in. "Fire!" she shouted. "Someone set the alley dumpster on fire. It's spreading." Keanu and Jeremiah jumped to their feet. Staff rushed toward the back. Thick, black smoke had started, billowing into the alley, curling upward like a serpent. Flames licked the walls near the back exit. The air became hard to breathe. Keanu didn't hesitate. He grabbed the fire extinguisher near the kitchen and ran straight toward the blaze. Jeremiah followed, grabbing another. They sprayed the flames, as staff ushered customers out through the front. The fire was stubborn, feeding on cardboard and plastic, crackling louder as it climbed higher. The walls behind the kitchen were turning black with soot. Jeremiah shouted, "Someone call 911." Maria had already done it, standing near the front with her phone pressed to her ear, voice shaking as she gave the address. Her eyes were wide, with fear as she watched the smoke crawl higher. Then a second explosion, smaller, sharper, blew out a backlight fixture. The restaurant's power flickered, and Keanu vanished inside the smoke. "Keanu!" Jeremiah shouted. No answer. Without thinking, Jeremiah ran in after him. He found him near the pantry, coughing but still spraying the extinguisher toward a pile of burning debris that had collapsed near the back wall. "We need to go," Jeremiah yelled, grabbing his arm. Keanu stumbled, dizzy. "Someone's still inside. I saw a woman go into the restroom." Jeremiah froze. "I thought everyone got out." "Not her. They moved together, shielding their faces with their sleeves, and found the woman, a young mother cradling her toddler, trapped by fallen beams and too terrified to move. Keanu lifted the beam while Jeremiah helped the woman up. "Go," Keanu urged. "I'll hold it." Jeremiah led the woman and her child toward the door. Smoke bit at their lungs, making each breath feel like fire, but they burst out just as the sirens wailed in the distance. Keanu came through seconds later, coughing, his eyes bloodshot. Paramedics arrived. Firefighters swarmed the scene. The flames were finally extinguished. The damage was bad, but not total. The next morning, newspapers ran a different kind of headline. Keanu Reeves and homeless. Worker save mother and child in late-night blaze. It spread like wildfire. But this time, the story didn't just highlight a celebrity act. It showed Jeremiah, his courage, his grit, his willingness to risk everything for a stranger. People began referring to the restaurant not by its original name, but simply as Keanu's. Table offers came in. Interviews, features, even film adaptations, but Keanu declined them all. "This isn't about fame," he said to Maria. "It's about what happens when someone sits down and realizes they still matter." She nodded. "So what now?" Keanu looked at the blackened wall near the back, then at the rebuilt booth, where he and Jeremiah had once shared soup in silence. "Now we rebuild," he said. But deep down, he knew something else had been set on fire that night. Not just the restaurant. A movement, a way of seeing the world. And it was only just beginning. The last reservation, 3 months had passed since the night the fire tried to swallow everything. The scorched back wall of the restaurant had been restored, but Keanu had made sure one section of the blackened bricks remained untouched. A small patch by the alley exit where the flames had burned hottest. Above it, he placed a bronze plaque with a short inscription that simply read, "This wall stood. So did we." Inside, the restaurant had changed, not in name or in menu, but in meaning. People no longer came just for the dishes, which were still elegant and award-winning. They came for the feeling. They came because they'd heard that this was a place where people were seen, where every chair could hold a story, and every table could offer more than food. Keanu walked through the restaurant early one morning, long before the first guest would arrive. He moved quietly, his fingers brushing across the polished wood of the tables, the soft velvet backs of the booths. Memories rested in each corner. He reached the booth where it had all begun, the one where Jeremiah had first sat, hungry and hesitant. Now that seat was reserved permanently. A small golden plate was embedded in the table edge, reserved in honor of the first guest who reminded us why we serve. Jeremiah himself was no longer in the kitchen. He had taken a new role, not as a dishwasher or waiter, but as the director of a new outreach program born directly from the restaurant's transformation. They called it the second course. It partnered with other restaurants, training those who had been homeless, in recovery, or long forgotten by society. It gave them not just jobs, but dignity. Each week, Jeremiah returned to the restaurant for one night, open heart night, a special evening where no one paid with money. Instead, guests brought letters, drawings, or small acts of kindness done earlier that week. They shared stories, they connected. Maria handled the event logistics. She stood at the front door, greeting every guest like an old friend, smiling with the quiet power of someone who had watched the world fail her father, then watched him rise again. One evening, a boy no older than 15 came in. He was alone, with dirt on his sneakers and a nervous shuffle in his step. Maria noticed right away and gently asked, "Can I help you?" The boy hesitated, then pulled something from his hoodie pocket, a crumpled note written in shaky handwriting. It read, "Helped a girl in my class eat lunch when no one else would sit with her. I don't have money, but they said kindness counts here." Maria took the note, read it, and smiled. "It counts more than you know," she said, and led him to a table. Keanu watched this from across the room. He sat that night not in a private booth, but at a community table, one of the long wooden ones placed near the windows. Beside him sat a retired teacher who now volunteered at shelters. Across from him, an elderly couple who had donated their anniversary party fund to the second course program. They shared food, and stories, and laughs. But Keanu's eyes kept drifting to the doorway, because something inside him told him that the story wasn't done, and he was right. Outside, under the faint glow of the street lamp, a familiar figure approached. Clinton Voss. Same sharp suit, same tight posture, but his face looked different, now tired, weathered. Something had shifted. Keanu stood and stepped outside before anyone else noticed. Voss looked surprised, but not aggressive. "You still own the place," Voss said quietly. "You're not here to start again, are you?" Keanu asked calmly. Voss shook his head. "No, I've been watching. I lost everything trying to destroy this." Keanu said nothing. "My firm dropped me," Voss continued. "My name's poison now. Even my clients walked away. All because I tried to take down a man feeding soup to someone who needed it. And now?" Voss pulled something from his jacket. Not a lawsuit, not a contract, but a letter, handwritten. "This is for Jeremiah," he said. "I owe him an apology." Keanu took the letter, his hand firm but not cold. "He'll appreciate that." Voss turned to leave but paused. "This place, it's not just different, it's dangerous." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous?" "Yeah," Voss said, a weak smile playing on his lips. "It makes people believe the world can change, and that kind of belief, it's contagious." Then he walked into the night. Inside, the restaurant glowed with warmth. Laughter spilled into the air like music. A young girl stood to read a poem about her father's struggle with addiction and how he came back. A chef brought out dessert not on a silver tray but on an old wooden board, carved with the words "For those who stayed." Later that night, after the last guest had gone, Jeremiah returned to the booth. He sat with Keanu in silence for a long time. "Used to think kindness was something weak people clung to when they had nothing else," Jeremiah said. "Now I know. It's what strong people hold on to so they never forget where they came from." Keanu nodded. "And where they're going." "Do you think this will last?" Jeremiah asked. "Or will it fade once the world gets distracted?" "Again?" Keanu looked around the empty room, the dimmed lights, the clean floors, the quiet hum of the city outside. "It'll last," he said. "How do you know?" "Because someone's going to walk in tomorrow just like you did," Keanu said softly. "And when they do, someone will see them. And everything will start again." Jeremiah leaned back. "Then we better be ready." Keanu smiled. "We always are." And so, the restaurant stayed open, not just its doors, but its heart. A place where stories didn't end in silence, where names once lost were spoken again, and where the smallest seat at the table sometimes held the greatest voice. In a world where most places serve meals, Keanu's table served hope.